Welcome to Daily Drive for Wednesday, April 15th, 2026. I'm Kellen Walker in Las Vegas. Today on the show, Stellantis explores a tie-up with China's Dongfeng. Nissan says the math isn't mathing to move production from Mexico to the U.S. And VW takes a big hit on its shuttered Tennessee plant. Plus, Ford's Andrew Frick talks about the automaker's evolving truck strategy, including extended-range electric pickups.
We learn and we adapt and we pivot, quickly to what the customer is looking for.
Let's run through all the news you need to know to keep up in the auto industry. Stellantis is reportedly looking to team up with Chinese automaker Dongfeng Motor, and it could mean big changes for both companies. The idea is to give Dongfeng access to underused Stellantis factories in Europe. In exchange, Dongfeng would build some Stellantis brands in China. Dongfeng reps have already toured plants in Germany and Italy. Bloomberg reports Stellantis has also been talking with Xiaomi and Xpeng. All this comes as Stellantis reports that first quarter shipments jumped 12% to over 1.3 million vehicles, led by a 17% surge in North America. That was thanks in part to bringing back V8 Hemi engines in Ram trucks. We'll have more on all of this in a minute with Automotive News Europe's Peter Siegel. Nissan's facing a math problem it can't solve. The automaker has looked at moving its Sentra and Kicks from Mexico to the U.S., but CEO Ivan Espinoza says it just doesn't pencil out. Here's the thing. These are entry-level vehicles built in Mexico precisely to keep them affordable. Shift production north, and the price jumps beyond what budget-conscious buyers can pay. Nissan America's chairman Christian Munier calls the 25% tariff on Mexican imports unfair, especially when European and South Korean vehicles only face a 15% rate. Together, the Kicks and Sentra made up nearly 30% of Nissan's U.S. sales last year. And Volkswagen is taking a big financial hit this quarter after pulling the plug on ID4 production at its Tennessee plant. According to Bernstein analysts, the automaker will book a charge of 60 to 75% of the $800 million it originally invested to retool the Chattanooga facility. A VW spokesperson confirmed those calculations. Here's the silver lining. Bernstein says VW will actually benefit from no longer selling a model that isn't profitable. And those are today's headlines. You can find more details on all those stories at autonews.com. Stellantis' possible tie-up with China's Dongfeng would have big implications for both automakers and their home markets, and it could signal a potential path for Chinese automakers into the U.S. Our own Jake Neer talked about that with Peter Siegel, news editor for our sibling publication, Automotive News Europe. Jake reached Peter this morning at his home office in Paris.
Peter Siegel, welcome back to Daily Drive.
Thanks for having me. I'm here in Paris. It's a lovely day, and I think we're going to talk about Stellantis a bit.
Yeah, that's right. I'm really interested in this reported interest in a possible tie-up with Dongfeng. What would Dongfeng get out of building cars in underused Stellantis factories in Europe, and why is that attractive to them right now?
Well, for Dongfeng, it's very attractive because they wouldn't have to build a greenfield factory or even renovate what's known as a brownfield factory. They can just use some of the space that Stellantis has, and Stellantis has a lot of extra capacity, especially in Italy. And they would also be able to avoid some EU tariffs on electric cars, sort of extended range hybrids, and also EU tariffs in general. It's 10% general tariffs and up to 35% for EVs built in China. So if Dongfeng wanted to expand its presence in Europe, which they would follow companies like BYD, SAIC in doing so, it could be very attractive. For Stellantis in China, it's also a good proposition because if you remember, Stellantis has largely withdrawn from the Chinese market. They had produced Jeeps there. When it was PSA, the PSA side of the operation had produced Citroën, Peugeot, and DS models. And in fact, they had a huge tie-up with Dongfeng. It was called DPCA. They had 4 factories. And at one point, China was actually PSA Group's biggest market. They had sales of, I think, around 700,000 in as recently as I want to say 2016 or 15. That kind of fell apart through a combination of missteps and also the growth of Chinese domestic producers. But I'm sure Stellantis would love to be able to figure out a way to get back into that market, even on a limited scale, and also using what you might call an asset light model. So they wouldn't have to go and build factories, and maybe they could use Dongfeng's dealer network. So there are benefits to both.
From an American perspective, I have to ask this question, which is, we've heard predictions that Chinese automakers could find a way into the US market somehow, even within 2026. And that one possible route is tie-ups with existing American manufacturers. Of course, Stellantis is a European company, but of course they have a huge presence here and they're still considered part of the Detroit Three. So could this be a route for an automaker like Dongfeng to get into the US?
I mean, theoretically, yes. There are lots of hurdles, high tariffs, concerns about cybersecurity, national security, technology transfer, things like that. But one thing that could make a Chinese brand more palatable to American regulators and also American consumers would be to say, look, these cars are built in the US, they're built in American factories with American workers, possibly American union workers even. They're sold at a dealer you all know. You can go down to your corner Ram dealer or Jeep dealer, and maybe you could buy one. So theoretically, yes, it might be a little premature, but it could be, as they say, the narrow end of the wedge. So that remains to be seen.
So Stellantis just reported a big jump in North American sales. I'm curious why the company is scrambling now to find Chinese partners for its European operations, given that result.
Yeah, that's sort of that's actually quite a good question. But I think what it points to is Antonio Filosa, the CEO, is taking a look at the whole operation and asking himself, where can we shore up things like production? We have all this unused capacity. What can we do about it? We don't want to lay people off. That's socially not very palatable. How can we fight off competition from China, especially in Europe? Do we join them if we can't beat them? So that's one of the questions. And these reports are coming ahead of a very important investor day on May 21st in Detroit, where Filosa will lay out his vision for Stellantis. It's his first strategic plan since taking over, and we can already get an idea of where he's heading with collaborations. And if you look at the sales figures, a lot of that was achieved through incentives, discounting, things like that, especially in Europe. So we can get sort of broad outlines of where his at least near-term vision for Stellantis is.
Peter Siegel is news editor with Automotive News Europe. Peter, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks. It's a pleasure. See you next time.
Coming up, Ford's Andrew Frick discusses the automaker's truck strategy and extended range EVs. That's next on Daily Drive.
Are you a dealer creating a workplace culture your employees are proud to be part of? Applications are now open for the 2026 Automotive News Best Dealerships to Work For program. This isn't just an award, it's a chance to get real insight into what's working at your dealership and where you can improve. And we've expanded the categories this year, recognizing everything from technician experience and leadership development to AI enablement and employee retention. The registration deadline is April 17th. Find out more and apply at autonews.com.
Welcome back to Daily Drive. I'm Kellen Walker. Like most automakers, Ford is in the middle of a major reset when it comes to its electrification strategy. And that also means rethinking its overall pickup strategy along with it. Andrew Frick is president of Ford Blue and Ford Model E. He spoke with our own Molly Boygan at the J.D. Power Automotive Forum in New York City this month.
Andrew Frick, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's good to be here with you, Molly.
So you had some really interesting things to say on stage at the Auto Forum here in New York City, one of which was talking about sort of retooling Ford's strategy around its pickup truck offerings, including an extended range EV truck. So I'm wondering how you're thinking about that. Are you viewing extended range EVs as a hedge, as a sort of transition technology, or as a really entrenched future direction?
Yeah, I wouldn't call it a hedge. I actually think it's a good bet based on the customer use case. So as we had our first generation F-150 Lightning, we learned a lot from our customers, from the product capability, from the customer. And one of the things they were telling us is they want the ability to drive on electric range, but when they need it and have to do more durable work with extended ranges, they would like to shift to a gas technology so they don't lose any performance around payload and towing, any of that capability. So EREV is actually, we believe, going to be a really good solution for our next generation Lightning. So we think it's just based on customer use case.
And when you talk about some of the issues with the first generation Lightning, you mentioned the sort of compromises that consumers had to make on payload. I'm wondering if that was sort of the primary driver of some of the issues, or what do you think really went wrong with the Lightning?
It's not that it went wrong. It was performing as it was designed. Some customers that thought an electric truck would be able to do some of the same capability as their gas truck, learned that it was not in the best situation. So that's where we got the feedback from.
Got it. And just in terms of you were also talking about consumer expectations around affordability. And I basically am wondering if, in your view, the Lightning's release what was sort of the main factor in not having that demand not materialize as expected? What was it? The payload issue? Was it affordability? Was it something else?
I think it was just the overall adoption rate of the industry. A lot of people were forecasting, mass adoption. They were also forecasting very high price premiums, and we didn't see the adoption rates at the same rate, and the customer told us otherwise, meaning us, the industry. So we learn and we adapt and we pivot, quickly to what the customer is looking for.
That makes sense. And, Ford and many other automakers were relying on a reservation and deposit system during those early years of the EV transition that sort of artificially inflated demand or cast projections for demand that didn't materialize. I'm wondering what you think about that. I mean, do you agree with that contention? And if so, how are you thinking about reservations and deposits differently now based on that experience?
Well, we've run deposits not just on Lightning. We've done it on other vehicles like Maverick and Bronco and Mach-E as well. And it makes sense for a lot of reasons. One, not every customer that raises their hand is going to necessarily transact on it. That's true across the whole industry. You can pick a lot of companies that have done this. But what it does is give us a different sense for what they are looking for, allows us to engage with them ahead of time and see if we can curate a different type of exchange leading up to a production launch. So I think we'll do it again moving forward. How we structure it may change depending on the product. And, different customers react differently in different segments. So a lot of that is really dependent on the product and the customer that we're going to be targeting.
And, given these long development timelines, and it's so interesting how the climate has been changing so much over the last 6 years. And obviously, even before that, a lot of the talk of the show today has been about the Iran war and the impact on gas prices. And, Ford appears well positioned with that, given the $30,000 midsize electric truck you all are planning. But how are you ensuring that you're not sort of mistiming this next release with these sort of ebbs and flows in EV interest and in these cycles?
Because we're not just betting on ebbs and flows. This goes back to betting on the customer and what their use cases are. And whether it's right now or a year from now or 3 years from now, there's going to be a different environment that we know. When we get the product right, the offering right, in the price, range that the customer is looking for, then that can withstand any sort of macroeconomic environment. And, that's what we're excited about with our new first vehicle off of our electric vehicle platform. But it's also true across the rest of our portfolio right now, from Broncos to F-Series to Mavericks. It's just, build the right product, what the customer is looking for, and put it in their range, and we'll be successful. I really like the position we're in.
And on some of those other macro factors, trade, tariffs, supply chain have all been really important. I wonder if you can say a little bit more about how Ford is recovering from the Novelis fire. I know that you're sourcing aluminum overseas, but the Iran war is raising the price of aluminum. So how is managing that supply chain in the wake of that event?
We continue to manage it. We're on track with what we've stated and, previously stated. A lot of our recovery is going to be in the second half of the year, which is consistent with what we said. And we launched a third crew at our Dearborn truck plant. That went seamlessly. So I feel like we're in a good place right now on plan with what we thought we would see with the recovery.
And on tariffs, so you also mentioned this a little bit on stage, continuing to invest in American manufacturing and American labor. I'm wondering if you all are basically anticipating that the tariff burden is going to remain functionally the same as it is now. Like, do you anticipate a significant change in the tariff burden for Ford, or are you basically moving ahead assuming that the 25% parts and vehicles tariffs are going to remain in effect?
Well, the tariff environment has changed with some of the rulings that we've seen. At the same time, we're ready and flexible to move with whatever the administration states. And, this is where Ford, as the most American automaker, where we, employ the most employees and also build over 80% of our production that we sell here is produced here in America. So we never really left a lot of our manufacturing base here. So it puts us in a position to adapt a lot quicker. And be a lot more nimble than maybe some of our competitors.
Ford has encountered some recall issues over the last couple of years, and the company has framed the high recall count as a proactive quality strategy. And I'm wondering how that's resonating with customers and dealers. Like, are they receptive to that message, and how are they responding?
Well, I hope the customer's receptive to it, because even in times where we haven't seen any customer instances of issues, we are being proactive with some of the recalls we're issuing, a lot in the software space. So we're doing that on behalf of our customer, and we're obviously doing on behalf of the dealers as well. So I think they're being very receptive to it. And that, we've seen a really big improvement in our initial quality metrics coming out, been validated by several third parties. So we feel like we're going in the right direction. But this is all about taking care of the customer and doing it the right way.
Andrew Frick, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Ford's Andrew Frick spoke with our own Molly Boygon at the J.D. Power Automotive Forum in New York. That's Daily Drive for today. I'm Kellen Walker. Thanks to our own Urvash Kakaria for his reporting for today's podcast. We also had reporting from Peter Siegel of our sibling publication, Automotive News Europe. You can get the latest news on electrification strategies, partnerships with Chinese brands, and everything happening in the auto industry at autonews.com. Come back tomorrow for an exclusive conversation with Nissan CEO Ivan Espinoza about his vision for the company, including plans to deploy AI-driven autonomous technology across 90% of its lineup.
It's a strategy that is founded on a clear vision of bringing mobility intelligence to everyday life.
We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think of the show and the topics we covered today. Send us an email at dailydrive@autonews.com or leave us a voicemail at 313-444-2774. And if you enjoy the podcast, remember to like, leave a review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.